Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Have you ever found yourself at a loss for words during an important conversation? Or perhaps you've said something in the heat of the moment that you later regretted? Maybe you've watched someone command a room with their words and wondered, what's their secret? The way we speak shapes our relationships, our careers, and ultimately our lives. Yet most of us have never been taught how to truly master this fundamental skill. Today, I'm going to share something unique. 20 powerful speaking techniques rooted in Stoic philosophy, the ancient wisdom tradition that produced some of history's greatest communicators and leaders. These aren't just typical public speaking tips. These are profound principles for communicating with clarity, purpose, and wisdom in every area of your life. Whether you're giving a TED Talk, navigating a difficult conversation with a loved one, or simply trying to express yourself more effectively in daily interactions. What makes these techniques special? They don't just focus on how to impress others. They transform how you think about communication itself. The Stoics, philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, understood that true power in speech comes not from fancy techniques or manipulation, but from the alignment of our words with truth, virtue, and purpose. These techniques have transformed the speaking abilities of thousands, from executives to teachers to people simply trying to connect more authentically with those around them. By the end of this video, you'll have a practical toolkit of speaking techniques that few people know about, but that have been quietly shaping influential communication for over 2,000 years. If you're ready to transform not just how you speak, but the impact your words have on the world around you, hit that like button and let's dive in. Part 1. The Foundations of Stoic Speech. Before we get into the specific techniques, it's important to understand the core principles behind Stoic communication. Unlike modern approaches that often focus primarily on persuasion or performance, Stoic speech is built on 3 foundational elements. First, clarity of thought. The Stoics believed that clear speech begins with clear thinking. As Seneca wrote, speech is the mirror of the mind. They understood that confusion in communication usually stems from confusion in our own thoughts. Second, alignment with truth. For the Stoics, speaking wasn't about winning arguments or manipulating others. It was about aligning our words with reality. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." And third, speech as service. Perhaps most importantly, the Stoics viewed communication as an opportunity to be of service, to educate, to clarify, to heal, and to improve. Epictetus taught that speech should benefit both the speaker and the listener. These foundations might seem simple, but they're revolutionary in a world where communication is often used to posture, impress, or manipulate. With these principles in mind, let's explore the 20 specific techniques that will transform how you communicate. Part 2. Techniques 1 to 5. Mastering your internal dialogue. The first 5 techniques focus on what happens before you even open your mouth. The Stoics knew that powerful external communication begins with mastering your internal dialogue. Technique 1. The pre-speaking reflection. Before important conversations or presentations, take a moment to ask yourself 3 questions derived from Epictetus. Is what I'm about to say true? Is it necessary? Is it beneficial? This brief reflection helps filter out what the Stoics called empty speech. Words that serve no purpose other than filling silence or drawing attention to ourselves. When applied consistently, this technique can eliminate roughly 30% of what most of us say, the portion that typically serves our ego rather than our audience. Technique 2. The purpose, clarification. For any significant communication, clearly define your purpose using this Stoic framework. What truth am I trying to convey? How does this serve the listener? What virtue am I practicing through this communication? This technique forces us to move beyond merely wanting to sound smart or be liked to focusing on actual impact. Leaders who implement this approach consistently report greater clarity in their messaging and more meaningful engagement from their teams. Technique 3. The impression examination. The Stoics taught that we should examine our impressions, initial reactions, before expressing them. When you feel a strong urge to speak, especially in emotional situations, pause and ask, is this impression accurate? Is my reaction proportionate? What principle is guiding my response? This technique is particularly valuable in conflicts or when receiving criticism. As Marcus Aurelius advised, be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. Technique 4. The emotional distance practice. When emotions run high, the Stoics practiced creating distance between feeling and expression. Before responding in emotional situations, acknowledge the emotion internally. Name it specifically: anger, fear, excitement. Decide if and how to express it constructively. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions, but rather choosing how they influence your communication. As Seneca wrote, the greatest remedy for anger is delay. Technique 5. The perspective shift. Before speaking on a contested topic, the Stoics would mentally inhabit different perspectives. Try this 3-step process. Consider how someone who disagrees would view this issue. Identify the strongest version of the opposing view. Incorporate this understanding into your framing. This technique prevents speaking from a narrow or defensive position and leads to more nuanced, persuasive communication. It's particularly effective in negotiations and conflict resolution. These first 5 techniques might seem like they're delaying the actual speaking process, but that's precisely their power. By mastering what happens before you speak, you set the foundation for everything that follows. Now, let's examine how this internal preparation translates into the actual structure of your message. Part 3. Techniques 6 to 10. Structuring your message. The next 5 techniques focus on how to structure your message for maximum clarity and impact. Technique 6. The essential. First Stoic communication puts the most important information first. As Seneca advised, before all else, we must take care to speak plainly and clearly. This technique involves identifying your single most important point, expressing it concisely at the beginning, supporting it with only the most relevant details. This approach respects your listener's time and attention while ensuring your core message isn't lost. Organizations that implement this technique often see improved decision-making as key information isn't buried in excessive detail. Technique 7. The concentric circle structure. The Stoics often organized their ideas in what we might call concentric circles, moving from core principles to specific applications. Start with a universal principle, move to the general application, end with specific examples. This structure helps people understand not just what you're saying, but why it matters. It's particularly effective when explaining complex ideas or when you need to persuade someone to adopt a new perspective. Technique 8. The contrary position. Acknowledgement. Unlike many modern debaters who ignore opposing views, the Stoics made a point of acknowledging contrary positions. State the strongest version of opposing views. Acknowledge their merits. Explain why your position still holds. This technique, which Cicero, influenced by Stoicism, called prolepsis, builds credibility and demonstrates intellectual honesty. It shows you've thought deeply about the topic rather than arriving at conclusions through bias. Technique 9. The analogical bridge. The Stoics were masters at using analogies to make difficult concepts accessible. Identify something familiar to your audience. Draw parallels to your more complex or unfamiliar idea. Use the comparison to illuminate rather than oversimplify. Marcus Aurelius compared life to wrestling rather than dancing, suggesting we should be ready and unshaken for what comes our way. What familiar reference point could help illuminate your message? Technique 10. The progressive revelation. Rather than overwhelming listeners with everything at once, the Stoics often structured their teachings as a progressive journey. Begin with what the audience already accepts. Introduce new ideas that build upon this foundation. Guide rather than force the intellectual journey. This technique respects the listener's autonomy and creates engagement through discovery. It's particularly effective when your message challenges existing beliefs or requires paradigm shifts. These structural techniques are powerful because they work with human psychology rather than against it. They recognize that how we organize information is just as important as the information itself. Let's now move to techniques that focus on the actual language and delivery of your message. Part 4. Techniques 11 to 15. Language and delivery. The next 5 techniques focus on how to use language and delivery to maximize the impact of your message. Technique 11. The clarity principle. The Stoics valued clarity above all ornamental language. As Seneca said, speech devoted to truth should be straightforward and plain. This technique involves using concrete rather than abstract terms, eliminating unnecessary jargon, choosing precision over impression. This doesn't mean speaking should be dry or bland, rather that every word should serve clarity. Organizations that implement this principle often report dramatic improvements in team alignment and execution. Technique 12. The noble pause. The Stoics understood the power of strategic silence. Epictetus taught that one should be silent for the most part, or say only what is necessary and in few words. This technique involves pausing before key points, allowing important ideas to sink in, using silence to emphasize significance. The noble pause demonstrates self-control and confidence while giving your audience time to process your message. It's particularly powerful during emotional or complex discussions. Technique 13. The concrete example. While the Stoics valued universal principles, they knew these must be grounded in tangible examples. Epictetus regularly used everyday situations to illustrate philosophical points. This technique involves following abstract ideas with concrete illustrations, using examples from your audience's experience, making the unseen visible through specific scenarios. Studies show that concrete examples improve comprehension by up to 50% and retention by nearly 70%. The human mind is wired to grasp and remember the specific over the abstract. Technique 14. The virtuous voice modulation. The Stoics believed that even our tone of voice should reflect virtue. As Seneca noted, the tone of the voice should be adjusted according to the nature of the subject. This technique involves matching your tone to your message's purpose, speaking with measured pace during important points, avoiding extremes that might distract from your message. This isn't about theatrical performance, but about ensuring your delivery reinforces rather than undermines your words. The key is authenticity and appropriate expression. Technique 15. The question. Transformation. The Stoics, following the Socratic tradition, understood that questions engage the mind more deeply than statements. Instead of telling people what to think, transform key points into thoughtful questions. What would happen if we viewed this challenge as an opportunity? How might this decision align with our deepest values? In what ways could this apparent obstacle contain hidden benefits? Questions invite listeners to arrive at conclusions themselves, rather than having them imposed. This creates deeper engagement and ownership of ideas. These language and delivery techniques demonstrate that how you say something can be just as important as what you say. The Stoics understood that effective communication appeals to both reason and human psychology. Now, let's explore techniques specifically designed for challenging communication situations. Part 5. Techniques 16 to 20. Mastering difficult conversations. The final 5 techniques focus on navigating challenging communication scenarios with wisdom and virtue. Technique 16. The charitable interpretation. When faced with potentially offensive or disagreeable statements, the Stoics practiced what we might call charitable interpretation. Assume the best possible intention behind the words. Respond to the strongest version of their point. Seek understanding before disagreement. As Marcus Aurelius advised, when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil. This doesn't mean accepting poor treatment, but rather approaching conversations without unnecessary defensiveness or assumption of ill intent. Technique 17. The virtue first response. In heated moments, the Stoics prioritized virtue over victory. When tensions rise, identify the virtue most needed in the moment: patience, courage, justice, etc. Let that virtue guide your response. Focus on exemplifying the best of humanity rather than winning. As Epictetus taught, make it your study then to confront every harsh impression with the words, "You are but an impression, and not at all what you seem to be." This technique transforms conflicts from ego battles into opportunities for personal growth. Technique 18. The agreement identification. Before addressing disagreements, the Stoics looked for points of agreement as a foundation. Begin by explicitly stating what you both agree on. Acknowledge shared goals or values. Frame disagreements as different approaches to common aims. This technique creates psychological safety and a collaborative atmosphere. It reminds both parties that you're seeking truth together rather than opposing each other. Negotiations experts have found that identifying areas of agreement first can increase the likelihood of successful outcomes by more than 30%. Technique 19. The personal stake removal. The Stoics practiced detaching their ego from discussions. When you feel personally attacked or defensive, mentally separate your identity from the topic. Focus on what serves truth rather than what serves you. Release the need to be seen as right. This is what Epictetus meant when he said, "If someone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer. He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would have mentioned those as well." This technique creates freedom in communication by removing the burden of defending your ego. Technique 20. The practice of gratitude in speech. The final technique is perhaps the most transformative, incorporating gratitude into our speech. Express genuine appreciation for others' perspectives. Acknowledge what you've learned from the exchange. Find opportunities to voice gratitude even in challenging conversations. As Seneca wrote, "Nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart." This technique transforms the entire atmosphere of communication, creating connection rather than division. It reminds us that every conversation is an opportunity to grow, regardless of outcome. These techniques for difficult conversations might be the most valuable of all, as they're often where our communication skills are most tested, and where the impact of our words can be most profound. Part 6. Implementing these techniques. Now that we've explored all 20 techniques, let's talk about how to actually implement them in your daily life. The 3-technique focus. Rather than trying to implement all 20 techniques at once, choose just 3 to focus on for the next 30 days. Select one from the internal dialogue section. Choose one from the structure section. Pick one from either language or difficult conversations. By focusing on just 3 techniques, you'll be able to practice them until they become natural. After 30 days, you can evaluate your progress and perhaps add 1 or 2 more. The Communication Journal. The Stoics were dedicated to self-reflection. Create a simple communication journal. Before important conversations, note which techniques you plan to use. After the conversation, reflect on what worked and what didn't. Identify specific moments where you could apply these techniques better. Next time, this practice accelerates your learning by making it conscious and deliberate. As Seneca wrote, "Each day acquire something that will fortify you against poverty, against death, indeed against other misfortunes as well." The daily speaking practice. Set aside 5 to 10 minutes daily to actually practice these techniques out loud. Select a topic you care about. Apply specific techniques to how you express your thoughts. Record yourself, if possible, for review. This might feel awkward at first, but remember what Epictetus taught. If you want to be a good reader, read. If you want to be a good writer, write. If you want to be a good speaker, speak. Consistent practice, even for just a few minutes daily, will yield remarkable results over time. These implementation strategies might seem simple, but they're based on the Stoic understanding that excellence comes not from knowledge alone, but from consistent practice and reflection. We've covered a lot in this video. 20 powerful speaking techniques rooted in ancient wisdom, but perfectly suited for modern life. These aren't just techniques for giving speeches or winning arguments. They're tools for living with greater wisdom, connecting more authentically with others, and making your voice a genuine force for good in the world. The Stoics understood something profound about communication, that our words are actions with real consequences. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, words that everyone once used are now obsolete, and so are the men whose names were once on everyone's lips. This perspective gives our communication both gravity and freedom, gravity because our words matter, and freedom because what matters is not praise or popularity, but speaking with clarity, truth, and virtue. I'd love to know which of these techniques resonated most with you. Drop a comment below, sharing which one you plan to implement first and why. If you found value in these ideas, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more content where we explore practical wisdom for modern life. And for those who want to go deeper, I've created a downloadable worksheet with exercises for each of these 20 techniques. The link is in the description below. Remember, the goal isn't to speak to impress, but to speak to serve. In the words of Epictetus, first learn the meaning of what you say and then speak. Until next time, this is Stoicism Quotes, reminding you that how we speak shapes not just how others see us, but who we become.